Hey folks, Jimmy here, aka Palette of the Dead. Welcome back to the channel and welcome to the latest issue of Warhammer Age of Sigmar Stormbringer magazine. Now, as per usual with all these videos, if you like them, hit that like button. Subscribe to the channel if you haven't already, and of course, drop me a comment down below. I love hearing back from you guys. It goes a massive way to helping out the channel too. Now, this week we're on issue 78. It's not the most all singing, all dancing kind of issue. It is, it's a flying stem and a base. So two of them for the Stormdrake Guard. Obviously, the way these bases work is that you can super glue that down, put your basing materials over the top of it to make it kind of, blend in and not look like a clear piece of plastic on a black frame. And you'll just slot it into that hole on the underside of your Stormdrake Guard, and away you go. Now, the thing for me is that if you are going to be, you need to paint these guys. Don't paint them on that flying stem, because you can make a mess of it, and you want to keep it as clear as possible to make it look better. The other thing, though, is if you are going to spray paint it, for instance, you might want to use the flying stem. However, masking tape is your friend for this. So, literally, super glue it down, masking tape all the way around this whole stem. You don't necessarily need to do it across the actual base because you're going to cover it over anyway with some basing, and use your spray paint. That's how I personally am probably going to do it, to base coat and undercoat the Stormdrake Guard. But otherwise, fairly simple, fairly straightforward, not really much to write home about with that, so it is what it is. But otherwise, it is now time for us to jump into this week's issue, of course. So, first off, we have a final bit of a different story. So we have Nature's Gambit. Now, I can't remember the last time I read any part of a Nature's Gambit story, so I weirdly think that they've kind of not put everything in an order. So instead of having all the stories in order like they did with Mortal Realms, so if you had like part 1, part 2 and part 3, all of them came in subsequent issues, so they might be split up by the occasional issue in between where there's no story, but they didn't have other fiction in between. They carried on, which makes more sense. This time round, they seem to have split everything up, and there's different sections going into different places, and it feels weird, it feels wrong, and I'm not a fan of that. It just feels like you're missing out and you're not finishing off the story at the correct time. To me, anyway. Anyway, the story's pretty decent. It's the finale part to it. Obviously, it goes over a few pages, so going over 4 pages, which is fairly easy and fairly straightforward. And away you go. Then we move on to our painting guide. Now, our painting guide for the Stormdrake Guard is obviously a more unique painting guide. It's all to do with sub-assembly, so doing your sub-assembly of your riders, going over the sub-assembly of the Draconif themselves. So, entirely up to you how you want to go out doing it. My personal tip, though, is brush painting these drakes with Wraithbone. You are going to use tons of paint. Personally, get yourself a spray, whether it's the Citadel spray, whether it's good old Colourforge or anything like that. Now, it will save you a far lot of time and a far lot of effort. Just make sure you're doing it in a well ventilated area, and it's around about 20 degrees and it's fairly dry. If you're going over 20 degrees, sometimes the paint will dry before it actually touches a model. If it's too cold, it takes ages to dry and may not dry properly at all, and it might dry streaky and stuff like that. So you need to get that temperature balance right, really, for spray paints, but it will save you an absolute time and a lot of time and effort for painting these. If you're painting it by brush, our widest brush that we've had is just a small-ish dry brush. It's going to take you forever. If you're doing it straight out of the pot, you're going to be using several different layers, and it's going to take you forever. So I would definitely spray it. Now, my tips for this, I do recommend Colourforge. 1, the spray cans are bigger than the Citadel ones, and 2, they are a very, very close colour match to the Citadel colours. So for instance, if you get Standard Grey, it's very close to Mechanica Standard Grey. If you get Raven Black, I think it is, it's very close to Corvus black. If you get good old I can't remember what their alternative to Wraithbone is now, but I'm thinking about it. It is very, very, very similar to Wraithbone. For instance, I spray painted that part from the scenery, and it's almost 1-for-1 with good old Wraithbone. So I do recommend it. The thing that you do need to remember with sprays is you need to shake them very, very well. Make sure the can is warmed up to at least the ambient temperature of wherever you're going to be spraying, and spray in a very, very well ventilated area. So obviously spray outside is best option really, but yeah, it's very straightforward. Just nice even coats over all of it and away you go. Makes life so much easier. You do occasionally, like for instance my ivory coloured Colourforge spray paint has come out a little bit grainy and it's a little bit powdery, but the actual overall coverage is actually very good, and the powderiness you don't notice once you've painted it. So for instance, painting that up, that's as smooth as anything. It just kind of comes out a little bit powdery, but yeah, it's a bit weird. But anyway, pretty decent. I would definitely go for that vote. And then layer up your colours using things like washes. So you can use your Colia green shade, which actually is a very, very good tip for painting these guys up. Obviously do it kind of in a glazed manner, so you're going to layer it up in thin coats. If you don't do it in thin coats and you go on too thick, it can go a bit gloopy and it'll look a bit patchy and a bit rubbish. And you're going to want to do it a bit kind of multiple thin coats. You do it like a glaze. You're only going to be doing it over certain areas as well, so only doing it over, say, like the top and then different colour on the bottom, so you can kind of change how you're going about doing it. Obviously, you do not have to do that colour. You can do other colours, so if you've got things like any of the other shades paints, you could use those. You can use contrast colours, just thin them down, so you can thin them with water. It's not always recommended. If you have the contrast medium, it's far, far better. But otherwise, you know, definitely use inks over everything else because it will make life a lot easier. And yeah, makes a better colour scheme. Anyway, so that's how I would personally do it. And then obviously you go in with all your details after that. But yeah, pretty decent, works very well. Doing all your other bits and pieces, so obviously you're going to want to paint them up with a very similar colour scheme that you've already gone for all your Stormcast Eternals. Obviously as well for the Riders, very much the same. So paint them the same as you would any other Stormcast Eternal, and obviously make sure you're not painting over the areas where you're going to need to glue it to sit it down, because if you're gluing onto paint, it can actually kind of melt the paint and not stick properly. So, and yeah, you're just going to want to go through all your details. When you're done, you're going to have something that looks similar to this. Now, I like this. I don't like the way they've done the basing because they haven't really done it very well. I would try to kind of blend that the bottom of that flying stem in as much as possible. So if you can put it on the bottom, super glue it down, then cover it over, and then use things like tufts of grass and static grass and such like that, and little rocks and bits and pieces. So if you've got any say spare shields, for instance, so you can pop them on the floor. You can put any other bits and pieces as well, so you can kind of all them little bits and pieces that you get as extras on sprues, kind of use them as scatter to kind of coat the bottom and hide and blend it in and hide everything, and then it works a lot better, in my opinion anyway. But you can make it look a lot far better, and yeah, you'll have something that looks really good at the end of it. So that is the main thing with it. Once you're done, it's going to look fantastic. So, and that's your aim. Then moving on, we obviously have our Warscroll for the Stormdrake Guard. Obviously this Warscroll is now out of date because of a new edition of Age of Sigmar, so yeah, take it with a pinch of salt, but it's very similar. So they are almost identical in a lot of ways for that good old Warscroll, but otherwise very simple, very straightforward. Obviously it has some pretty cool unique abilities as well, like being able to use Flame Stream, being merciless in their impact. They can use a dispersed formation, so they can be slightly separated and right next to instead of right next to each other. And they do have some arcane abilities as well, which is really cool and pretty good stuff. So really cool, and definitely the best minis from Stormcast Eternal range that we've had so far with this magazine. So they definitely saved the best for last, really, didn't they? And then moving on, we've got our battle plan obviously for the week. So we're using 2 heroes, 2 troops, and using just 1 battle mat for this fight. And very straightforward. Have a bit of fun with it, enjoy yourself, play it through as much as you really want, and you're going to have a great time. Then moving on, so the next 2 issues, the final 2 issues, are of course Swamp Boss Stormdrake Part 1 and Part 2. So we will get a sprue for 1 part, we'll get the second sprue, and then we'll get the base. Yeah, and that's it for the run of this magazine. So issue 80 will be our final issue in 2 weeks time. It's going to be sad. It's going to be sad to see it go, in all honesty, because it's been a great magazine, really enjoyable, some really cool minis out of it as well. But obviously it is now time for us to move on. And talking of moving on, obviously, if you've been following the channel, you may have already seen that I've posted about and done videos on the upcoming Combat Patrol magazine. The magazine launches on the 28th of August in the UK. If you want to subscribe to it, the link to good old Hatchet Works is in a post that I made earlier today. That's now live, their website is, so you can have a good look at what you're going to get. You can go through all your kind of bits and pieces. The final image of the collection has been released as well for it, and away you go. If you're outside of the UK, obviously you will have a register your interest period. So for instance, if you're in the US, that website has now gone live, so worth checking out if you want to. The other thing I'm going to say is I will be doing the magazine. I finally decided, I put a post out asking if people wanted to see it, and the answer was yes. So yeah, I am going to do it. I am going to do it weekly. However, the second issue will be delayed because I'm actually on holiday. But anyway, we will take a look at it. We will go through it. I will paint up some models, and there will probably be some that I don't do on camera, and we will try to talk about it as much as possible. And I am going to try and learn as much about 40k as I can with you guys, kind of in real time. So I'm going to pay more attention to the magazine than I did, say, Imperial magazine, and we'll go from there. But obviously there are other things in the pipework, so we will wait and see what other content comes out on the channel. But obviously this is not the end, and issue 80 will not be the end. Age of Sigmar will carry on this channel in some capacity, and yeah, we'll have fun with it. But otherwise, I've rabbited on more than long enough, should I say, for you guys. Thank you very much for watching. If you want to, leave a comment down below, as per usual, and thank you very much for, you know, enjoying this journey with me and accompanying me on that. And yeah, we'll go through. But yeah, thank you, and I'll see you later. Bye bye now.